Welcome back to Family Fridays. We're so glad that you are here. School is getting ready to start, and that is anxiety provoking for all of us. And so, here at Family Fridays, we wanted to spend some time walking with you through going back to school and what that's going to look like. I'm Rachel Poisky. I'm a Duchenne mom and a coordinator for South Texas. And I'm so excited for our panelists today, and I'll get to them in just a second. Today, we are focusing on going back to school in person. Next week, we're going to talk about if your family has made the choice for virtual. We know these are hard decisions, trying to decide what to do, to go in person, to do a hybrid, to go virtual. And our goal at PPMD is just to walk beside you, whatever choice that you made. We know each family has different situations and dynamics. And so today we're focusing on those of you who have made the decision to move to take your children to school in person, and just to give you some tips and some assistance with that. Before we go to our panelists, I want to make sure you are aware of a very important resource that everybody should have in their toolbox, their Duchenne toolbox. It is Education Matters. It's a guide for parent and teachers. You can go on that link and you can either download it, or you can also order a hard copy of it. I encourage you to please go and order those and give those to your teachers, maybe with a bouquet of flowers or some chocolate or Starbucks gift card, but get those into your teachers' hands. And also for you, those are guides that we have spent a lot of time working on as we are trying to help you be resourced and help your teachers be resourced. Remember, some of your teachers, this may be the first Duchenne child that they've ever encountered. And so these are some resources that can be so helpful for them to get acclimated to your child and their needs. So please go and take advantage of this resource. So today, our panelists are all Duchenne moms and from around the country, and they all have expertise in education. And so they are the best people that we need to talk to today about going back to school in person. We have Jill Castle, who is a DMD mom, and she's also an Arizona coordinator for our Connect group, and she has worked in educational advocacy for years. And so she's going to talk a lot about IEPs. I know a lot of people have said, what do we do about those this year? And that sort of thing, and just some other things. And then Jenny Garofalo, who is a DMD mom, and she is also a school nurse at an elementary school, maybe the best school nurse I've ever met. And she is going to just tell us about protocols and what we need to know and how to prep our kids to get ready to go. And then Erica Rome is a DMD mom from South Florida, and she's also a teacher. She works specifically with children with autism, and she's going to give us, from the teacher's perspective, what do we need to know and how do we need to communicate well with our teachers. So let's go ahead and start with Jill and let her tell us a little bit about how we can work with our school. I think you need your mute off, Jill. Yeah.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Just to let you know where I'm coming from, I've been a special ed director. I've also been a teacher of everything from kindergarten all the way through college. I have worked for the State Department level of education here in Arizona. And then most importantly, I'm a parent of a son with Duchenne who's 20. So I mention all that because since my background's in educational psychology and behavior, but what's been most important through my journey is the fact that I've sat at every seat at the table of an IEP, from administrator all the way through parent. I've gotten a bird's eye view of how the collaboration piece should work. Because when I've gone and advocated for my son as a younger, as a parent of a younger son with Duchenne, I was all about fighting, and I was all about rights, and I was all about making sure technically the IEP was perfect, and so I could make sure all of his needs were met. And it was very intense. And as the years went on and I sat in other seats, such as the teacher's seat or the administrator's seat or the State Department when I came in and did dispute resolution, I learned a lot about what all the parties are going through and what it looks like on all the different sides, which made me a much more effective advocate as a parent, because I could ask for things that were realistic, that were actually going to be helpful, that were going to actually help solve problems, rather than just worrying about fighting for my right and having no understanding of how that's going to be implemented or what that's going to look like on the other side. So hopefully that's what I can bring to the table today.
Great, thank you, Jill. And you'll have a chance in a little bit just to ask Jill some questions regarding, IEPs and things like that. You can put them in the comments section, and we will ask them from there. So I want to move on to Jen. And Jen, just introduce yourself and tell us, what have you been doing to get ready for the kids to come? What are some of the protocols and things that we need to be aware of when we show up to the school? Okay.
Hi guys, thank you for having me. I am Jenny Garofalo. I live in New Jersey, one of the hot spots, and I have a 16-year-old Angel, Duchenne boy, and so I come to you as a Duchenne mom and as a school nurse. We have been working tirelessly with the Department of Health and with the Center for Disease Control to make sure that when students and staff enter the building, that everything is safe to the best that we can provide. So we have been, every district and every state is going to be a little bit different, but for the most part, masks are going to be mandatory for all children. You can, in addition, for elementary children, I would start getting them familiar with what pictures are going to look like. So what are teachers going to look like? They're not necessarily going to look like we're looking right here, right? They're going to be an adult with a mask on. Some of them might even have a face shield. You should pull up some images of what the classroom is going to look like, because it's going to look very different than what they're used to if they've been in school before. If they haven't been in school before, it's going to look very different than their preschool, and that they're going to be sitting a lot. And so we have some ideas of what you can do, to what you can request for what's the safest way for my child with Duchenne to be in the classroom.
Great, thanks. And Jen, I'm sure we'll come back to you as well with maybe some of the other things, but I think what you hit on that is so important, that preparation is key, especially for our boys who like to know every step along the way, is you're going to have to do some prep before they go into the classroom, or you may have a meltdown on your hands. So as prepared as you can be ahead of time to give them the information they need, and the knowledge that it's not going to look the same, is going to go a long way toward that transition. So speaking of some of that transition, I'm going to move to Erica now, our teacher and Duchenne mom, and let her tell us a little bit from the teacher's perspective. And especially, Erica, let us know, what are some good practices for communicating with your teacher?
Hello, thank you for having me. My name is Erica Rome, and I teach in an autism cluster classroom with children kindergarten through second grade. And then I also have a 6-year-old boy who's going to be in first grade. As you can imagine, this is sort of a crazy time for teachers prepping, and it's a whole new way of teaching for them. Some of the things that are really important with communicating with your teacher is to ask them first and foremost, what's the best way to establish communication about your child. Some of the things that I've done with my students that might be helpful for those who are back in the classroom is we have a notebook, and the teacher can write anything in that notebook, and you can write something back to them. That can sometimes help with the communication things. Some of the teachers will have classroom apps like Class Dojo. That might be a way to communicate. So it's really, when that teacher calls you, that's a great opportunity to say, I know things are really busy for you. What's the best way for me to get in contact with you? be empathetic and sympathetic to these teachers. They are working their butt off. Your child is very important to them. So I always say, kill them with kindness. Just be patient with them. They're going to be patient with you. Some of the things about the transitions, especially working with my students, one great thing you can do, especially for the younger kids and maybe some of the older kids that have difficulty with this stuff, is create a social story. If you talk to the teacher, get pictures of the teacher, get pictures of the classroom, get some idea of their schedule, and then you can create the story and read it to the kids and show them what the room's going to look like, what their teacher looks like with and without their masks. If you can't get the real information, you can Google things online about back to school, and they will have the story for you to go over with your kids. PPMD created those great back to school things, and I just found out in the back has an all about me section. That's a great opportunity to fill out some information about your child. If you know what your child's challenges are and ways to help them, let the teacher know. If your child has difficulty with transitions, let me know and I will give him a transition warning if it's not already in his IEP. If he needs a visual schedule, let me know. I will create that. It's just about informing the teachers. If there's sensory issues, loud noises, bathroom issues, you need to just let us know what those things are. For a suggestion for those who have to wear masks back to school, if your child is not in favor of them, one of the ways that we can get some kids to do it is if they like electronics or something like that, have them wear the mask while they're doing something they love and get a little bit used to it. You can also look at potentially face shields. I'm not sure if the schools are all going to require masks, but sometimes face shields will work better for the kids. And again, just let the teacher know what you need, and I guarantee you they're taking it into consideration, even if right at that moment they seem a little flustered or whatnot. They are taking it and they will implement it.
Great, that's really helpful. And kind of staying on that, I want to go back to Jen and want to ask you to share two things. That one that kind of comes from what Erica said, but I know you would do letters for Danny to the teachers, and if you could just share, some things that you would include in those letters that helped the teacher. And then the second thing, so this is then a second totally different question, is what's for your school, Jen, what are some specific things that you know are changing and protocols that are look different? Because although every school will be different, I think that'll give some people, because I think parents are just also unsure exactly what are they walking into. Will there be music? Will there be the PE? Will there be recess? So if you could just give us a picture of what your school is going to look like too, I think that would be helpful.
Okay. All right. So first off, ever since Danny was in kindergarten, we started writing a "This Is Me" letter. We wrote it for him, like K to 2, and then by third grade we had him start writing it. What are things that I did over the summer? What are things that I'm good at? What are things that I might need your help with? Um, Danny always needed help with physically transitioning. And so that was something we wanted the teacher to know right away. We didn't want her to think that he was being disrespectful because he couldn't get up off the floor. Um, and so we made sure to, put a picture of him on the paper, write a letter that had all, as succinct as we could, all this is me, this is what, and we made sure that it went to every single teacher that was going to encounter him, because don't forget, the music teacher, the art teacher, in some schools, they only are with them for 20 minutes, 30 minutes a week. And so those teachers are going to be the one that you really want to make sure you reach. Does your child need to go to the bathroom more frequently? So there's just little things that you want to make sure that you convey to the teachers. And we would work alongside with the nurse to kind of brainstorm, like, what are things that, they're gonna need to know for him, about him. Um, and then I always included a little Dunkin' Donuts card. so that they, we're asking them to read a lot of information with that Education Matters. It's so chock full and it's great. But, just a little incentive, like Erica said, kindness like goes a long way. Um, in terms of what is the school going to look like? So, um, is there going to be music? I think in New Jersey, anyway, there will be some form of music. It will not involve singing. It will not involve playing instruments. Um, there is, it's just too much aerosol of germs. So right now, the recommendation is that that is not being done. In our building or in our district, everything will be on a cart. I don't know what they call it in different states. So the children will stay in one spot and everybody will move to them. So art will be moved into them. Recess, they will go outside, just their class though. So everybody will get recess, but it'll be just their class and they will still have to remain socially distanced. Gym, weather permitting, they will go outside. If the weather is not permitting, then they will be doing gym at their desk, and really just stretching. And gym won't look like what gym always looked like. In all honesty, for DMD boys, COVID and social distancing is going to level the playing field for gym, which is, everybody's going to be the same. Um, let's see, what else can I tell you? Everybody will have their own, we teach sharing, like we're sharing all our stuff. We're not sharing anymore this year. So that's going to be, and that's going to be a big thing for elementary kids, who we constantly are saying like share and work together. This is going to be a very you space. This is going to be your space. Hallways are going to look different because they're going to want you spaced out. And most schools are going to one direction. One side of the hallway is going this way, one side of the hallway is going this way. Um, Bathroom time, elementary kids, this is why I say, like, in that letter or email or whatever, however you're going to communicate with your teacher and your school nurse, if your child is a child that frequently has to go to the bathroom or doesn't necessarily have that urgency, so it's just when I've got to go, you want to communicate that with the teacher, because then they're going to want to make a plan with the nurse, and so that your child can be taken care of that way. Because chances are we're going to go to, your district will go to where everyone goes to the bathroom at set times, frequently, but at set times. And I guess that's the like main takeaway, is that they don't want children just walking around in the hallways like we've done in the past.
That's great. I think every Duchenne mom did a happy dance when you said their gym's gonna not look the same. That's like, hey, that's one thing off our list, so we don't have to worry about, right? You don't have to bring the Lego tub out for the whole class so they can sit and play Legos. So yay, one thing for Duchenne, one bright spot. The other thing I was gonna just highlight with that Education Matters again is, I also, just a little tip, I would go in and highlight the most important parts in case I had a teacher that, they're busy. They've got a lot of stuff to do. And so I would even put on there, I've highlighted the most important parts for you so that they could skim through it. So I encourage that. And especially to pick the things, because there's some things that won't be applicable to your child. And so to kind of highlight the things that are most important. Now let's go back to Jill and just talk about IEPs and what does that look like this year? And also, we may be asking for different things in our IEP. We may need to let a few things go in our IEP. So can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I was just taking notes on that. So people do need to remember an IEP is a working document. It's fluid. It can constantly be changed. It can constantly be updated. You're required to meet once a year. Doesn't mean that's the only time you meet. That doesn't mean that's the only time you use the document to convey your goals, okay? this applies for normal time too, but especially during COVID, really be aware of how many goals you're writing in your IEP, okay? Because honestly, I've been on the other side of that, both in the classroom trying to take data on all those goals and setting up so that all those goals get accomplished through the day and making sure the data gets taken for that. I've also been on the SPED director side where I've had to read hundreds and hundreds of IEPs rather than spend my time teacher training and doing things that actually really made a huge difference. I don't mean that IEPs aren't important. I don't mean those documents aren't an amazing tool to use. I just, during COVID, if you scale down what's really important, because things that you have on your wish list that can't necessarily be implemented during COVID, it's a time that you could really scale down and focus on other things that you might want to work on, some social issues or behavioral issues in reciprocity, or some of the other challenges that you want to try to work on with your kiddo, because you can't necessarily focus on the 7 academic goals that you had. There's just no way that's going to be implemented. So if you could really think about what's most important and make those key points, you're going to have a better track record of getting those teachers to be able to implement those goals and take data on it. Because don't forget, they have to take data on all that stuff too. So if you write 7 goals, they're obligated to take data on 7 goals. I mean, that is, if you have 5 kids in your class, even if you're in a typical class and you have 5 kids with IEPs and they each have 5 to 7 goals, that's really, really putting the teacher in a tough position. So if you could keep that in mind, that's probably really helpful. Focus on some of the things that you can introduce and teach your child about flexibility, about, like I said, reciprocity, about kindness, and some of the things that are really big themes right now with COVID. I mean, these are things that we're really struggling with. All of us are really struggling with. So if we could use this time to work on our kid being more flexible, which most of our Duchenne boys have trouble with, this is a great time for a behavior intervention for flexibility. Or like we talked about, some of the sensory integration issues with the masks, or with having to change up their schedule because all of a sudden they have an outdoor classroom and they can't go out that day because it's raining, or some of the on your feet flexibility that's going to happen during COVID. Instead of being afraid to approach that with your kid, perhaps maybe use this as an opportunity to work on that flexibility. Because I will tell you, as a parent of a 20-year-old, our boys get progressive in that area as well. If you talk to most parents that have boys that are older, OCD becomes a really big deal. So if we don't instill that flexibility at a young age, and we all of a sudden have to pull it out at 18 because they've got severe OCD, it's a lot harder to work with than if all along we've cultivated that flexibility and put behavior interventions in place to make them more and more flexible with each thing. So all that would look the same way as when you do your night splints, where you just do a little bit with the reward, you add a little bit more, you give them another reward, and you just basically expand them into more space. That goes across the board with probably everything you're going to try to work on flexibility with.
Okay, thanks, Jill. What I wanted to move to, and remember, go ahead and put your questions in the comment section and we'll try to get to some of those. But Erica, I wanted to address something with you, especially not just as a teacher and a Duchenne mom, but also the population you're working with. But we know that our Duchenne boys in general usually have a higher state of anxiety, and COVID has been a big part of that too, is added to that. And how do you, what are some recommendations you have for just our boys with anxiety coming back to school? I know my son just got freaked out going out to like the pool for 5 seconds. So I know they're bringing a lot of anxiety to school. So what are some recommendations you may have for that?
Well, with the anxiety stuff, I think that's another thing to communicate with their teacher. Does their teacher have a calming area or an area where they can kind of go, or another room? I guess during COVID they can't. So some of that stuff is before school starts, start practicing some of those deep breathing exercises. Yoga is actually pretty good, from what I hear, is good for our boys because it's stretching them a little bit. Help them find ways that they can help self-soothe. So is music helpful? Is breathing helpful? Is standing up and moving their body helpful? It's important to understand um, that there's anxiety and sort of ways that they can express that. In school, it might be a little different. Some of our kids need to fidget. So can we put something in their hands, or can they have something under their desk, something that can just help them get out that extra energy? And again, it's important to communicate that with your teacher so that they know, oh, here are the warning signs, and when these things happen, this is what helps them. You know, if it's music, then maybe you have to see if you can send in, you know, an iPod or something so they can put their music in. If it's breathing exercises, you know, maybe they need a timer so they can count their breaths. You just have to figure out what works for your child and then tell the teacher, and then they will implement them and they'll be able to know the signs. But the best thing is if you have things that they could even just have in their desk, silly putty to squeeze, a fidget spinner, a fidget toy. Um, and again, deep breaths and counting your breaths is a great activity because they can do it and nobody knows they're doing it. So those are some things that can help.
Thank you. That's helpful. I know, and I know Jen's got a suggestion too. I was going to say we definitely use that putty a lot. You get they're in little silver cans. I can't think of the name of them right now, but or I give them a commercial. But they have scented. They have all kinds of lavender and things like that, and those have been really helpful for us. So Jen, I want to go to you to continue down that path, and also I want to ask you a question we've had, and maybe Jen, you can answer this, and then Erica too. What, from your school perspective, is what protocols does your school, do you have in place in terms if someone does get infected? What is that going to look like for us? So maybe Jen, if you could speak to the anxiety piece, and then talk about kind of what is your school's protocol, knowing each school is going to be different, but just to give us an idea.
Right. So Think Putty is what you're thinking. The brand is Think Putty. Um, okay, so and just to add on what Erica said, two things, and I'm sure we can all attest to this, but we are going to set the tone for our kids. If we are anxious about them going back, they are going to be anxious about us going back. If we kind of just teach them that we're going to go with the flow, we don't know what it's going to look like, and every day is going to be a little bit different. Building on Jill's on the flexibility, I really am a strong proponent that what we project to them is what they are going to internalize. They are already anxious children to begin with. One of the things that we do with anxious children is we have Velcro that we put on their desk. So it's a sensory. They can touch both sides of the Velcro. So we put the soft piece and then we put the hard piece. Depending on their need at the moment, both of those will be utilized. The other thing I wanted to talk about is to find out what your particular child's classroom setup. Is it a teacher and a para? Is it a teacher and an aide? Is there a floating aide in the building? And the reason I say that is when when things get difficult, that para or that aide or somebody, and it might be the nurse, like if you're in a school building that's small like mine, it would be me, can come and get them and take them for a little walk. Maybe they pop outside and take a mass break and just able to get themselves gathered back together and head back in. So in your IEP, that's something you can request that have some mass breaks written into the day where they can go outside by themselves with their aide or para or somebody in the building to take that mass break. I think that's going to be really crucial for the boys to know that they have an out when they need it. What is it going to look like when someone is suspected? So we have been asked by the CDC to create an isolation space. Every school is going to be different in where they have that space. They will be brought down, whether it be a teacher or a child, they will be brought down to the isolation space. Um, and then they will be sent home, and then they will be asked to be tested. And then depending on what the test shows will depend on whether the classroom needs to then quarantine for 14 days or not. That's going to be different based on state, but for that is like what the CDC is requesting. You know, there's children have all different kinds of symptoms, so it's not it's not as black and white, because we're heading into allergy season, we're heading into flu season, and so it's going to be a tough decision. Um, you know, everyone's going to be going home, whereas you would have maybe erred on the side of, oh, it's probably allergies. We're not going to be able to make that gentle assessment. One thing you could do, and one thing we would do, is talk with your nurse, and if there is come up with a plan of how you want to handle if there are sick children. Do you want to be called to come and get your child? Are you comfortable leaving your child? This is a dialogue that you can have with your nurse. I have many students that are not Duchenne that, you know, it's a dialogue I have with the parents, and let's work together. This is what I'm here for. This is what I'm here to make your life easier, because you're leaving them with us for 6.5 hours in a day. And I think that having Danny has given me that, you know, other hat that I can put on, and I can appreciate more where the parents are coming from.
That's great. And I think developing communication with your school nurse and bringing them a Dunkin' Donut card is also important. I know just during when H1N1, before the vaccine came out, we were in communication with our school nurse every single day. And we said, if you know of someone that comes down with it in the school, we would like to come and get our son and bring him home. And so she agreed that, you know, we could be in communication about that. So I think get to know your school nurse as well is really important. Jill, I want to ask you a little bit, going back to the IEP, what do you think in terms of PT services? You know, should we be doing physical therapy at the school? Should we be asking for that? Occupational therapy, that comes with a lot of stuff. And then also infection control. Is there something, you know, since our boys are, you know, we're a little immune suppressed, is there something we should put in the IEP in terms of even more safety protocols for them?
Okay, those are great questions. Thank you. So, boy, I gotta be honest on the PT. I've never been a fan of utilizing. There are some exceptions. There are some places in the country where PTs will go above and beyond, school PTs will go above and beyond to learn our kids' needs and actually do the stretching at school or actually help them out. But it is not, you cannot legally expect that. School PTs are not clinicians. Very often they make a lot of mistakes because they aren't schooled on Duchenne. And so unless you've, unless you've really taken the time to train them and they're open to the training, we actually see a lot of our worst mistakes as far as pushing students with their muscles and things like that from school PTs. So, you know, obviously I've always recommended clinical PT outside is where your main PT should come from. The school PT's rule is more about looking at access in the classroom. Legally, what their job is to make sure your child has physical access to everything, not stretching them and all that stuff. So I would just be warned to, as always, be very careful with that. That would be no different with COVID, because staff is going to be even more stressed out, and it's difficult. The other part is utilizing OT and PT services, and hopefully those all look the same, because they're either doing them over Zoom for the students that aren't going back, or they're doing them for the students that go back. So that really shouldn't be much different than it always is. We always incorporated OT into the art class, or we incorporated it into their day rather than having them necessarily pulled out. Just, we did that for social reasons. But that shouldn't really change because the school numbers are actually less, you know, in a lot of circumstances. Writing the infection control into the IEP, great idea. Definitely needs to be in writing it in case you ever have need recourse to go back. So I highly recommend to write it in. However, write it in with pragmatic expectations. Write it in with really clear conversations as to what they're able to actually implement. Again, if you write in all these criteria that they have no ability to actually implement, you're pretty much setting them up for failure. You're creating fear amongst the team, and overwhelming people rather than getting them as a collaborative partner that's going to look out for your kid, knowing and being educated on the risks that our boys actually face. You know, over inundating them with criteria actually could shut them down and make them less aware of watching for your child. And we don't want to do that. So just going over the simple protocol of, like, for instance, you mentioned as soon as somebody's infected, we need to pick our student up. Sure, I would put that in the IEP just to cross your T's and dot your I's. Absolutely, because that way, if they don't, you have some leg to stand on, you know, if you have to unfortunately go for recourse of any kind, or compensatory education, or any of those types of things that happen when dispute resolution goes down. So always protect yourself, but just protect yourself with expectations that are realistic, that everybody can implement, so that there is actual safety and it's not just on paper.
Great. I wanted to ask Jen just a little bit about coming home, safety protocol coming home. Do you recommend, you know, they change their clothes, take a shower, you know, are there some things like that that you would recommend for the boys and siblings coming home, or the rest of the family? You know, how to, now that they're going to be out a little bit more, what are some things you recommend for just home? And do you have any recommendations in terms of, should they only go to school and not be out in other areas or something like that? Do you just have some helpful hints? I know every situation will be different and every family's choices will be different, but if you could give us a little bit of that perspective.
Okay, so yes, everyone is going to, the way I try to say it is, there's no good answers right now, right? We're just making the best out of all no good answers. So we, you know, Timmy is my senior, and he was a year, him and Danny are a year apart. And he commented when this all started back in March, he was like, the whole world gets to see how we live now. And I said, yeah, they do. So a lot of these things are going to be things that you already implement with your children, especially during flu season. Our family, what we do is, yes, if we enter the house, we're taking off our clothes and we're getting in the shower, and we're just moving on with our day after that. It's just switching our shower time to right when we enter from home. If you're a teacher, if you work in the school, you definitely want to be taking that extra step, because you're just protecting your family. And that's really what this is all about. What ways can we implement to protect our family? You know, I think, you know, for the boys, it's going to depend on where they are physically. If your child is a teenager and they're in a wheelchair already, and they're really not touching anything, then you can make the decision whether you want to, like, is that going to be too much work when you get home to take a shower right then and there? The younger kids that are going to be out and about moving around, you know, everybody strip into the shower. Siblings and spouses or parents that are out working, it's just an extra step just to be precautious. And, just kind of think of this as an overall, not just COVID, just kind of think of this as we enter into flu season. What are ways that I can protect my family? Um, and, I just think that that's good sound practice. Like, what are ways that I can protect them? We'll never know if we did too much, but we will know if we didn't do enough. And, in terms of if doing other things, it really depends on your state and your district and your numbers and what's going on in your community. I know that some areas of the country are not as hard hit as we are. So I think that that's going to determine whether you do extracurricular stuff. Just we try to think of it as a family that if someone was to call us tomorrow and say, where have you been for the last week? Because you were in contact with A and now we need to contact everybody that you were in contact with. That's just kind of how we think of it as a family. Like, how big did our circle get? How small is our circle? So that's just something you want to, like, if you keep in mind, like, if somebody was to call me as a contact tracer, will I be able to easily tell them the places I've been in the last week? Because that's really, then you're kind of zoning in on what your circle is for your family.
Thanks, Jen. I think that's really helpful to think about the circles. That helps me as well. Erica, I wanted to talk to you about what are just a few practical things maybe you could work with the teacher on in terms of, asking that your Duchenne child sit, farthest away from other children, or if you're in middle school, maybe asking if your Duchenne child could go in the hallway to their class ahead of time so they're not in the hallway with a lot of children or things like that. So what are some things that might be good advice for helping distance the Duchenne child even more at the school? And how would you suggest going about doing that?
Well, I think a lot of this stuff can also be written into their IEP. Having them leave a few minutes earlier is a great way to transition them. Also, then they don't have to try to keep up with the other kids, so it can conserve some of that energy as well. I think it's looking at, especially with COVID, we don't know how much they're going to be leaving their classroom. We don't know where they're going to be going. So that's where you need to have a conversation with the teacher to find out, are they leaving? Are people coming in? That letting them know, like, this kid is susceptible to things. So they might have 20, or they probably won't have 20 anymore. They might have 10 kids in there. We care as teachers. We don't want to see our kids get sick. We don't want to, we want to protect them. And that's one of the things that you can help the kid with anxiety. Your teacher's there for you. They love you. So if you tell me your kid is at risk, especially at this time, you've got to know that I will take that into consideration. Do we need to make sure that we have a shield on when we're with your child? If I go up near your child's desk, per se, should I put a shield on as well as my mask? I think that having a conversation with the kids in the class, depending on the age. Listen, my son, he has a special, we tell him he has muscle problems. He has special muscles. And part of that is that he can catch things and get sick easy. So when we're around him, we just got to make sure that we have our mask or our face shield up. And again, I think we have to understand that we get into teaching because we love kids. And Duchenne boys, maybe I'm a little particular, are just adorable and wonderful and the cutest little guys around. Your teacher's going to fall in love with your child. Tell us what you need. We will do it.
That's great. Thank you, Erica. And I also want to mention, we have siblings going back to school as well. And that's really important also to teach them to kind of preserve their bubble when they're going out. So, and to be aware of their spacing and that type of thing as well, so that can help. I think this has been great. I don't know, are there any, do our panelists have any other last minute things? Okay, Jen, Jen has a thing to add, and then we will wrap up with a couple of things after that. But Jen, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to add on to what Erica said. So for us, school was very social. That was our main goal. Was it was social. I didn't care if he could multiply. I didn't care if he knew who the founding fathers was. I needed him to know that he was with his friends and he was having a great time. Um, that being said, we were very particular with his aid, even through high school. Like, if his friends want to feed him, let them feed him. If his friends want to be the ones on the playground with him, let them be the ones. And you take like a kind of like a mom role, like a step back. You're there if he needs you, but you don't need to be all in on it. I will say that is a practice I would change right now, and I would only let your aide feed him, uh, because right now, unfortunately, we don't want to be mixing with the teenage, with the germs. Um, and I would explain, because it's going to be the older boys that you're going to be worrying about this with. And I would just explain, like, we can go back to how we normally practice when we're sure that things are a little bit safer. But right now, this is not saying you can't eat with your friends, you absolutely can, but this is something that we need to implement and pull back on.
Yeah, great. And I just also encourage you, to follow your mom and dad guts. And, you may get to a point where you take them and then you say, maybe this isn't the right option. And just that's communication, with teachers and schools and that sort of thing. And that may be even something you need in your IEP. I know some schools are asking you to commit virtual or in person. And so for an IEP, you may need to put that in there, that especially if someone gets sick or something, that you can change your plan easier than someone else. And then we've gotten a couple questions, interestingly, about going virtual. And I hate to put you on hold, but we're doing that next week. So next Friday, we're talking about if you've decided for virtual for your child. A couple of the questions have been, how do I make sure my child who's going virtual is included into the classroom where they're live maybe? And also, what do we do about siblings? Do we keep siblings at home as well? Again, we know these are all choices based on a lot of different situations, but next week we are going to focus on what if you've made the decision for your Duchenne child to be virtual, and maybe your siblings as well, how to handle that, because that's kind of another set of issues and things we have to think about. But we're going to tackle that one next week. So, but thank you so much, Erica, Jen, and Jill. Wow, I've learned so much, and I think that this has given us just some good tools and questions to take into the school year to be a little more prepared. If you have more questions, please reach out. We're here to just resource you. I know these ladies are probably available to do that and answer questions, but we want to help you. This is a difficult time. It's always making the best choices for your sons and daughters with Duchenne. It is hard, and even more in this situation. So we're here to help you navigate that in ways that are helpful and to resource you well. So thank you so much to these ladies, and we will see you next week for our Family Friday. Bye-bye.